the future of the human mind and body and the future of humans together is endlessly bright. We are not primarily biology, with mind emerging as a kind of iridescence, a kind of epiphenomenon at the higher levels of organization of biology. We are, in fact, hyperdimensional objects of some sort which cast a shadow into matter. And the shadow in matter is the body. And at death, what happens, basically, is that the shadow withdraws, or the thing which casts the shadow withdraws, and metabolism ceases, and matter, which had been organized into a dissipative structure in a very localized area, sustaining itself against entropy by cycling material in and degrading it and expelling it, that whole phenomenon ceases. But the thing which ordered it is not affected by that. And when I make these declarative statements, I'm making them from the point of view of this shamanic tradition, which touches all these higher religions. Everything, basically, except rationalism, holds to some version of what I'm saying. Obviously, when you evolve inside an animal body, localized in space and time, you get a hellacious set of reflexes and muscles designed to deal with immediate threat in your environment. But at the core of the oyster is, this portal into universalism, which we have denigrated to what we call the imagination. There is a third eye. The third eye exists, but it doesn't look out at this world. You've got two perfectly good eyes for doing that. The third eye looks out at the holographic matrix of information in totality. And then the problem for that form of perception is filter. Non-local domains of information. This has to do with this idea in quantum physics that there is something called Bell non-locality, that all particles that were ever associated remain associated in some mysterious way, no matter how far apart in time and space they have drifted. Well, according to the Big Bang, all particles were once closely associated at the moment of the Big Bang. It's actually scientifically true at the fundamental core of physics that all space and all time is in some form of simultaneous connection. Now, it gets a little dicey if you ask questions like, can we use this to get and send information? And I don't want to go into that because I think I already have the answer, no matter how good the arguments against it. I believe this is what the human imagination is. That you have two eyes to show you local space, and then you have an organ called the mind, which doesn't protrude anywhere on the surface of your body. But generally the mind is invisible, but it gives you non-local data. That's what the imagination is. That's non-local data. Everything in the imagination is real. Somewhere so far away in space and time that it makes absolutely no sense to give it another thought ever again. Don't ever think that thought again, but know that everything in the imagination is real. No doubt that we are the species transformation into a hyperspatial intellect. We are now, there can be no doubt that we are now in the final seconds of that crisis, a crisis which involves the end of history, the departure from the planet, the triumph over death, and the release of the individual from matter. We are, in fact, closing distance with the most profound event a planetary ecology can encounter, which is the freeing of life from the dark chrysalis of matter. The old metaphor of psyche as the butterfly is a species-wide metaphor. We must undergo a metamorphosis in order to survive the momentum of the historical forces already in motion. Well, if you know anything about evolutionary biology, you know that man is considered to be an unevolving species. In other words, sometime in the last 100,000 years, with the invention of culture, the biological evolution of man ceased, and evolution became a cultural phenomenon. Tools, languages, and philosophies began to evolve, but the human sonotype began to remain the same. And so we are very much like people a long time ago. But technology is the real skin of our species. Man, correctly seen in the context of the last 500 years, is an extruder of a technological shell. We take in matter that has a low degree of organization. We put it through mental filters, and we extrude Lindisfarne Gospels, space shuttles, all of these things. This is what we do. We're like coral animals embedded in a technological reef of extruded psychic objects. We have changed. We are no longer, as I said, bipedal monkeys. We are instead a kind of cybernetic coral reef of organic components and inorganic technological components. I mean, we are like coral animals in a vast reef of excreted technological material that is wired for solid-state data transfer. And within that, we scurry around doing our little tasks, but we come and go. The instrumentality remains and replicates and grows. Decision. It's happening around the clock. It's unstoppable. The cultural experience is becoming more and more psychedelic as it becomes more and more translinear and post-Newtonian. Literally, society is entering into a kind of hyperspace, or cyberspace, some people call it. I think of cyberspace as the literalization of hyperspace. One is the Platonic goal, the other is the human artifact that seeks to realize that goal. And the tool is soul exteriorized in three-dimensional space. It's, as James Joyce said, it's the problem of how man may be dirigible, right? And how man may be dirigible is basically by turning himself inside out. In other words, the body must become an interiorized hologrammatic object embedded in a solid-state hyperdimensional matrix, which is eternal, so that man wanders through Elysium in his body, experiencing all the pleasures of the flesh, but not realizing that he is a holographic projection of a solid-state matrix that is micro-miniaturized, superconducting, and nowhere to be found. It is part of the plenum. And all history is about producing prototypes of this situation with greater and greater closure toward the ideal, so that airplanes, automobiles, condominiums,
space shuttles, space colonies, starships of the hardware, speed of light, spin dizzy drive type. All of these are, as Mircea says, self-transforming images of flight that speak volumes about man's aspiration to self-transcendence, so that our wish, our salvation, and our only hope, basically, is to end the historical crisis by ending alienation, by recognizing the alien as the self, in fact, recognizing the alien as an overmind which holds all the physical laws of the planet intact in the same way that you hold an idea intact in your mind. In other words, all these givens, which are thought to be so rich in adamantine, are actually merely the moods of the God, if you will, which we happen to be. And the whole thing about human history is recovering this piece of lost information so that man may be dirigible.
Somehow, part of the package of being a living, thinking being is that you get a universe inside of you. You know, you get a galaxy-sized object inside you that you can access. And there are the mountains, the rivers, the jungles, the dynastic families, the ruins, the planets, the works of art, the poetry, the sciences, the magics of millions upon millions upon millions of worlds. And this is apparently who we each are. We're a little bit of eternity sticking into three-dimensional space, and for some reason occupying time in a monkey body. But when you turn your eyes then inward, you discover the birthright, the existential facts out of which this particular existence emerged. And it's a great secret and a great comfort, because it means, you know, mystery didn't die with the fall of Arthur, or the fall of Atlantis, or the fall of anything. Mystery is alive in the moment, in the here and now. It just simply lies on the other side of a barrier of courage. And it isn't even that high a barrier. It just is a barrier high enough to keep out the insincere and the misdirected. But for those who will claim it, in the midst of the historical chaos of the late 20th century, they become the archaic pioneers. They become the first people to carry the Ouroboros serpent around to its own tail and to make a closure. And to the degree that any one of us has this connection back to the archaic in our life, it makes where we have been make a lot more sense, and it makes where we're going seem a lot more inviting, which it really is, I think.